the anniversary of that awful day a year ago, 10/7, when 1,200 Israelis were massacred, more than 4,000 others wounded or injured, 250 kidnapped into Gaza. I will conclude today's show talking with former President Trump on this anniversary. I'm beginning it with Dan Senor, who, through his podcast, Call Me Back, has been indispensable for Americans eager to understand what has gone on in Israel and how it is going on. Good morning, Dan. Thank you for getting up very early with me. I know you've
Good to be
dropped a
with you,
special
Hugh.
episode of Call. Thank you. You've got a special episode of Call Me Back. I'll listen to that later. Can I ask you at the very start, a year removed from this massacre, how often do you think about the events of that day vis-a-vis Israel's many responses since then?
Every single day, many times throughout the day. I've had I, October 7th was a trauma. I think for me personally, and I think for the Jewish people collectively. And I think don't you don't learn to live without a trauma. I think certain traumas just are with you all the time. I lost my father when I was young. That was a trauma that I think about every single day. I can't think of another event. 9/11 for years, I thought about every single day. October 7th, certainly over this past year, I think about every single day. And as I said many times throughout the day, not only because there's the actual horror of October 7th that is just impossible to fathom. So you just keep thinking about it. But also, there have been so many mini traumas since October 7th that were catalyzed by October 7th. And I'm talking about both the war against Israel in the Middle East, the seven front war against Israel that was sparked by October 7th. So you're inundated with news every day to remind you of the ongoing trauma. And B, the shocking both wave of anti Semitism waged against Jews around the world, including here in the United States, and B, even those not participating in the wave of anti-Semitism, just the general lack of empathy among so many people, so many bystanders, if you will, that you come across in one's daily life, people you deal with, colleagues, peers, people you thought you were working with in various causes who just seem not bothered by what you're going through, what happened to the Jewish people on that day, or even worse, think there's some kind of nuanced framework to think about what happened on October 7th, and therefore lack any kind of empathy because they think the issue's more complicated than we would like to think, and so they're able to kind of disconnect from expressing any kind of support or solidarity. So when you add all that up, there's the trauma of October 7th, and then there are the many traumas throughout the past year that I just think most Jews have felt. So the idea that that was one day and then we kind of moved on is just couldn't be farther from reality.
Dan, this next question, if you're uncomfortable with it, just ignore it. You've got two
hmm
boys. I think they're in
hmm
junior high and high school, something like that.
High school, yeah.
What has been the impact of 10/7 and the subsequent year on them?
I think they lived a very charmed life as American Jews living in New York City, growing up here. I realize now we were all living through this um, Jewish golden age here in the United States. And what I think I have realized is it's the end of that Jewish golden age. This past year has been the end of that Jewish golden age. And for them, um, I just think they lived a very comfortable, um, coddled, if you will. I don't mean that in a negative way, but just as Jews, there was no tension in being Jewish living here. It never occurred to them. They go to a Jewish day school. They um, walk freely around New York City, or had walked freely around New York City, wearing their Jewish identity on their sleeve. They're very active in the Jewish community. Their whole lives are organized around Jewish life, Jewish communal life, connection to Israel, um, pride in being an American Jew, and pride in the the U.S.-Israel relationship, all these things they just assumed were normal, and suddenly all of that feels under siege when you go to a Jewish day school in many places in the United States today, like in New York City. On some days now, they go to school and there are NYPD cars sitting outside the school when they walk into school. You have parents, we don't, but I know many parents who tell their kids, don't wear a yarmulke when you're out in public. Don't wear a Magen David, a Jewish star around your neck. Don't. My mother, my mother, who lives in Jerusalem, who is visiting us right now. We wanted her to be out of there for a few weeks, given how tense things got. She's 86 years old, so she's staying with us. She always brings gifts. My kids are sports fans, so she brings them, American sports teams, but like the logos and the writing on the t-shirts are in Hebrew. This is like a thing she's been doing for years. This time when she came, she refused to bring those because she's concerned about them walking around the streets of New York City wearing a t-shirt that's in Hebrew because she thinks that there'll be a threat. My kids ride public transportation, New York City subways, New York City buses. That's not a safe place now for Jews. I mean, Jews get hassled, harassed, attacked. I mean, the ADL just came out with a study over the weekend that shows that since October 7th, there have been 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitism. And those include violence, they include vandalism, they include verbal and written harassment against Jews of all ages in the United States since October 7th, the highest level recorded since 1979 when the ADL started recording this. Multifold, hundreds and hundreds of percent increases over the same period over the previous year. So there's this moment, Hugh, over the past year. There have been so many of these moments, right? We live not far from Columbia University, so we see these protests and quasi pogroms around certain parts of Manhattan. We have a lot of friends who are Orthodox Jews who've been harassed, who live in areas like Brooklyn. But it's hard to pick which is the one that's most crystallizing. But to me, the one that was most crystallizing was on a New York City subway. And you may have seen the video
I did. Yeah.
these pro-Hamas protesters get on the subway, and before the subway doors close, they announce the subway car is packed, and they said, if you are a Zionist, raise your hand. If you are a Zionist, raise your hand. Now, the image of people coming onto a subway in the city with the largest Jewish community in the world outside of Israel and declaring that if you are a Zionist, raise your hand. And then they said, this is your last chance to get out. So raise your hand and get out of the train. This is your last chance. What does that mean? What if you don't get out? And I watched that video, Hugh, like 100 times. We had our kids watch it because what was so eerie about it is not only that nobody raised their hands, because I don't believe there were no Jews on that train, but no one raised their hands, but that the non-Jews were all just sort of minding their own business, looking the other way uncomfortably, just wanted to get on with it. And there was that sense of indifference, that sense of, like I said, that disconnectedness. You look throughout history when there are major spikes in anti-Semitism, and you wonder why they happen. In part, they happen because everyone else is just kind of minding their own business and wants nothing to do with it. And I watched that video so many times, and I thought to myself, and we talked to our kids, what should you do what would you have done had you been in the subway car? What would have been the right thing to do? There's not an easy answer, by the way. But you start to realize this image I just described, how it's just become part of life now. And I hate to say this, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think we are in a new world. And so I think it's that reality that our children who've lived these innocent, charmed lives as Jews in the greatest country in the world, America, are living something new now.
I'm going to continue talking with Dan Senor through 3 more segments. Don't go anywhere, America. I got to go to radio break across the affiliates, and I'll talk to him during the breaks. We'll post it all on the podcast, play some of it tomorrow. But in the meantime, I would also want to remind everyone, as we look back at that awful massacre a year ago, there is a horrific situation in North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. Team Recon, Salvation Army, many other people are involved in the active delivery of supplies there. You can find many people to help. But it's also a good day to remember the Hatzalah, which is Michael Oren's preferred charity in Israel, if you still want to help. There's still many people displaced from their homes in Israel after a year of bombardment from Hezbollah. Dan, we are talking about your boys. Have they internalized fear? Have they expressed fear about being a Jew in America?
They haven't they haven't articulated fear. They have articulated an awareness that there are people that hate us. They totally understand the lengths people will go to who hate us to express that hate. They're very aware of that, and they are very aware that that they have to be careful. 15, 16 years old, living in
I'm
America.
asking because the most shocking thing for me about 10/7 was the utter depravity of the attackers. I understand terrorism. 9/11, I was on the air for 8 hours, but that was 19 guys in a command structure. This was
Mhm.
thousands of people willing to slaughter children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children, carry away kidnappers, all the atrocity. Do they understand human depravity now?
Yes, 100%. In fact, my older son, and we may have talked about this at one point. My older son, my 16-year-old, last April over Passover, we were in Israel. It was their first time there since October 7th. It was my fourth time there, I think, since October 7th. But every time I go now, I do what we did with them on that trip, which is we headed down south to the Gaza envelope, to those communities in the kibbutzim in the south, to the Nova Festival site, and a year before that, about the previous summer, we had gone to Eastern Europe with my mother, as I said, who's 86, and she's a survivor of the Holocaust, with my mother and my other siblings and other nieces and nephews. So about 15 of us, three generations. We went with my mother to her hometown in Košice, Slovakia, which is a small town in Slovakia where she was chased out of by the Nazis in 1944. And she was on the run. Her father was taken to Auschwitz and was murdered there. And we went with them to Krakow, to Auschwitz, where my grandfather was killed. And it was a roots trip, and getting them to understand what had happened to our family, how parts of our family had perished during the war, and obviously a very hard thing for teenagers to experience. And then you fast forward to last April, being in Israel and touring those communities in the South. And my son, at the end of that day, said to me, I was asking them about what their reactions were to the day. And my son said to me, I know this is going to sound weird, but you remember last summer we went to Safta, as Hebrew for grandmother. He said, remember last summer we went with Safta to Eastern Europe and to Auschwitz? And I said, yes. And he said, today was harder than going to Auschwitz. And I asked him why. And he said, because as horrendous as learning about what happened in Auschwitz was, I had been, I just assumed that the world had become a different place, that the world had, I forget the exact words he used, but he meant reformed itself, or had become more enlightened or civilized. And he says, and then I see what happened in Gaza, in these communities outside of Gaza, Jewish communities, and I realize it's back, but it's in my lifetime now. He was saying this is not something that happened 80 plus years before I was born. This happened in my lifetime, like not just my lifetime, like months ago, and that was very hard for him to get his head around.
Dan Senor is now pretty much identified with the American Jewish community. His podcast, Call Me Back, is indispensable for understanding what's happened in the last year. His sister lives in Israel. His mother lives in Israel. He goes back and forth. He's written 2 books about Israel, including Startup Nation, and was very optimistic until 10/7. Now, Dan, we began with you and your boys because I wanted to now extrapolate to Israel as a whole, especially to the young men and women in the IDF and those who are 3 or 4 years behind them. How has this year changed? Is there iron in their soul, or are they weary to the point of collapse?
No, look, I think about that a lot. On the one hand, Israeli society is shattered, how could you not? For all the reasons you just said earlier, the 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 rape, the beheading, the slaughtering of children, the taking the most vulnerable among us, elderly people, children, women, hostage now for over now a year. I hate to say, um, yeah, so society's shattered, and then you see this celebration of that suffering of Jews, and that adds to the shattering, the celebration in many parts of the Middle East, the shattering even in corners of this country and certainly around Europe. But then you watch what's happened, Hugh, over the last few weeks. Not only what Israel has accomplished militarily in Gaza, which is extraordinary, but what Israel has accomplished in Lebanon and Iran, and specifically what it's done against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And you look at the combination of Israeli commandos, the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli intelligence, what they have pulled off. I mean, I have friends who work in former colleagues who work in three-letter agencies here in the United States, who work in the military and the Pentagon here in the United States. They're in awe. I mean, I was with senior officials from CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, last week. They're just they're just literally in awe of what Israel has pulled off. Now they would have been in awe of what Israel's pulled off in any circumstance. But when you consider the backdrop of what they've been going through this past year and then what they pulled off, it's doubly impressive. In 2023, Israel went through this horrendous debate, very divisive debate over judicial reform in Israel, which we write about in our newest book, In the Genius of Israel. And we talk about the toll that took on Israeli society. We were hopeful at the time that Israeli society would pull together. Uh, Even after that divided debate, we didn't anticipate that October 7th would be the the trigger, if you will, for society coming together. But at the time, many senior Israelis, professionals, military professionals, people in the Air Force, people in intelligence, who were very frustrated with what the government was doing, and said, "That's it. We won't serve. We won't. We won't. We're gonna sort of strike, if you will, from our regular training in these elite roles we play in the military." And those same people were the people who executed the pager attack against Hezbollah. These same people were the people who conducted the air operation that led to the badly needed demise of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, one of the most wanted terrorists in the world, someone responsible for not only Israeli and Jewish blood, but for among the worst terrorist attacks against Americans over the last couple decades. Who pulled that off? The same people who were out on the street protesting their government a year and a half ago. And so,
Excellent point.
yes, yeah, they have steel in their spine.
I have one more question, which will take us in the next segment. I've come to the realization Jews can never relax. Israelis doubly can never relax. They might laugh. They might have great. I once asked Dennis Prager, we were doing a program, why are Jews so funny? And, Protestants aren't. And he had a very good answer, which is it's the only way to relieve the tension of living as a Jew. But it's been a year of that. And I now want to ask Dan, and it will be off air, how does he react when Vice President Harris goes on 60 Minutes and casts doubt on the elected prime minister of Israel? It just seemed to me so stunning on the eve of the anniversary that she would do that. Of course, I'll have former President Trump on later today. I'll ask him the same thing. But don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Dan Senor, except go over to Call Me Back and follow it if you haven't. You'll be just much smarter about all things Israel if you go to Call Me Back. And The Genius of Israel is his most recent book. I'm certain there's going to be a third book on the year after or the 2 years after or whatever it is. But Dan is going to be the guy who is best positioned to write that for all of us. He'll be back for one more segment to talk about Vice President Harris, President Trump, and the place of Israel in election 2024. And you heard Vice President Harris. At least you've seen the clips. They will air in full tonight on 60 Minutes of her talking about Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu. How did you react to those clips?
I had a number of reactions to it, Hugh. It was a combination of her describing events that did not reflect real events. So I was sort of shocked that a senior U.S. official who wants to be the commander in chief of our military, of the most important superpower in the world, could be saying things that were so disconnected from reality. I was so that I guess was what I was most taken aback by. So, for example, she kept talking about we need to get to a ceasefire, where there needs to be negotiations for a ceasefire. Sure, that would be great. There's no ceasefire negotiations. Let's be honest, and there's no ceasefire negotiations because officials of her own administration say that Hamas is not serious about ceasefire negotiations. I was with one very senior official in the administration a month, 3 weeks ago, who's very involved with the hostage negotiations. He was very clear. Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government are not the reason there's no ceasefire. The reason there's no ceasefire negotiations is because Hamas is not an honest broker, is not approaching those negotiations in good faith. And so for her to respond to a question about Netanyahu and say, well, the answer is, cool, that's wonderful. Sure, let's get to a ceasefire. There are no ceasefire negotiations because they were trying to negotiate with a terrorist organization that tried to commit a genocide. Those are typically not the best organizations to try to negotiate with. A. B. The question was so ridiculous. The question kept being, do you not have influence with Netanyahu? Why can't you deal with Netanyahu? As though Prime Minister Netanyahu is the problem here. On the issues that interviewer was referring to, those are issues that there's total consensus in Israel. It's not about Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's about Benny Gantz, who just penned an op-ed. By the way, he and Netanyahu are bitter political enemies. And Benny Gantz just penned an op-ed for the New York Times where he lays out where all Israelis stand on Iran. And then it's also where all Israelis stand on what to do about Hamas and Hezbollah, as though this is a Netanyahu problem. And lastly, Hugh, what made me really crazy was, why does the U.S. What's the U.S. interest in dealing with Iran? What she should have said is, it's not about Prime Minister Netanyahu. We, the United States, have a reason to stop Iran, which is terrorizing ships and vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Red Sea, that are disrupting international trade, attacking civilian vessels. We, the United States, have an interest in stopping Iran from doing that. We in the United States have an interest in stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. So yes, we are allied with Israel on these issues, but we, the United States, this is not about who we have influence with or don't. It's about what is in U.S. interest. And last week, after Iran attacked Israel, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor in the Biden administration, went before the White House podium, went up to the White House podium and said there will be severe consequences for Iran. He said that, meaning the U.S. would be participating in severe consequences against Iran. Why? Why, Madam Vice President? Why does the U.S. think Iran deserves severe consequences? What is the U.S. interest in all of that? Does she not have a view on what the U.S. interest is? Instead, she engages in this silly dialogue, completely disconnected from reality, about what one Israeli politician is doing, which I found the whole thing actually quite alarming.
Oh, it is very alarming. And when you come back next, Dan, we'll talk more about the American media and its complete collapse of objectivity, candor, an attachment to facts as opposed to prejudice. I do think that legacy media is very anti-Israel for reasons we can get into. But right now, I want to thank you for a half hour on what will be a very emotional and busy day for you. I look forward to listening to the new Dan Senor Call Me Back podcast, which dropped to memorialize 10/7, and I appreciate your friendship on the air. Thank you very much, Dan, and be safe. Nick Mattis is the Washington Free Beacon weekend editor. He's also co-host of Getting Hammered. Vic, good morning. Thank you for joining me on a very somber day, the anniversary of 10/7. I would like to begin by asking you if you've seen the clips of Vice President Harris on 60 Minutes.
No, I saw the excerpts. I understand that the rest of the 60 Minutes, the full interview, is coming out tonight. But from what I have read, even the little parts, again, what you might think would be a softball interview for her, and I don't know how much editing they do in these things when they put it together, she still didn't come off well.
Oh, my gosh. She came off incoherent. But I just talked to Dan Senor about it on the anniversary of 10/7, and he's actually alarmed. That's his word, alarmed, that she is so clueless. Do you think that's fair? And Dan is not a particularly political guy. He served with the Iraqi Provisional Coalition Authority under W, but he's not a Trumpist. He's just very, very pro Israel, American Jew with a mom and a sister living in Israel. And he's just alarmed by her incoherence. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I love Dan. I think he's right about that. Uh, the problem for her is, of course, is who's going to be advising her. I mean, there was a story that she might just very well keep a lot of the current administration with her, and as we know, a lot of the current Biden-Harris administration are people who are very sympathetic to Iran and people who are not friends of Israel. And so when for example, I do understand in that 60 Minutes interview, she is asked if, Bibi Netanyahu, we consider him an ally, or we are an ally for him. And then she just wanted to talk about the larger picture of America and Israel being very close allies, and we have Israel's back. But you see, like with countries like France, for example, and Macron, they're now not going to give, any assistance to Israel when it comes to Iran, and very close to saying we're not going to continue to provide, weapons assistance, military aid. And you could picture that in the Harris administration and the Harris Wallace administration that they're going to go, well, if France is doing it, we should probably do it too, and dictate another country's foreign and defense policies. So, yeah, very disturbing.
Vic, in the context of assessing someone for any given job, there's the X line is no skills for this job to completely skilled for this job, and on the Y-axis there's highly intelligent to very low intelligence,
Yeah.
because you can sometimes compensate for lack of skills by high intelligence. The best thing to have is both high intelligence and high skills. Where do you
Sure.
put the vice president on that matrix for being president?
Well, I was never good at econ and I hated those charts and graphs with the X and the Y axes. But whatever it is that is the lowest, is it the bottom left or the bottom right that shows like it's like
Bottom
the worst
left
of
is
all
the
worlds?
worst.
Yes, the
Yeah.
bottom left. There you go. Again, you're talking to somebody with a C plus average in economics. But yeah, it's not good. And it's funny because I say the same thing with, trying to find a sweet spot for a candidate. I talk to young reporters all the time. I say, find the sweet spot between accuracy and efficiency. Getting it right and getting it done quickly, and that basically applies to her too. And she's not doing a great job. I mean, I get it. She had it was a steep learning curve for her. I mean, it was a short notice that she was going to step up. And obviously didn't have to go through any primaries, and then she didn't have as much time, certainly, to vet her current vice presidential running mate, Tim Walz. So I think we're seeing that in real time, which also explains why she doesn't want to do many real, and I say real interviews. I know that she's doing interviews. She's going to go on Stephen Colbert. I'm sure that's going to be a real tough experience for her.
Well, she did 60 Minutes. It was a disaster. So we'll see. Now I want to turn, Vic, while I have you. I heard just the beginning a conversation with you and Mary Catherine on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in Mary Catherine's
Yep.
native North Carolina. How do you assess the federal government's response 2 weeks in?
It's not good. As I was saying to a friend, if you think about what happened during Hurricane Katrina, which was a terrible disaster as well, and you think about the media's response to that, and they wanted to be down there in the coverage, and what was the reaction to it, and how did the federal government and the Bush administration respond, and they were really tough. You don't get that sense in the with the current media landscape when it comes to the Biden Harris administration. um, I mean, we're talking about well over 200 people died, and they weren't prepared for that. And then Kamala Harris goes down and says everybody gets a $750 check, but you can apply online. And you hear people saying that they're trying to bring families into hotels, but it's currently booked because all the FEMA people are there. It's not good. I know there's a lot of back and forth over how much money FEMA has. Are they truly bankrupt? How do they spend it? I mean, I think the bigger problem is Department of Homeland Security because they're the ones who get to dispense this money and sort of earmark it for FEMA. But either way you look at it, it's it lands on squarely on Secretary Mayorkas. But of course, as we know in this administration, nobody gets fired. So they're doing a terrible job, and I just think that I mean, if Trump were president now, we'd have all these reporters down on the ground, wanting to talk about this constantly. And they do. I mean, the media does it, but not to the extent that if it were a different administration.
Well, you know what's interesting to me is I know there are bad rumors out there. Local agencies are not diverting supplies. FEMA isn't stealing
Right.
Samaritan purses supplies, but I do think there's an aversion of the eyes by legacy media from the fabulously spectacular face plant of FEMA again. And I don't know if FEMA can do anything well other than maybe just write checks to the North Carolina, the Tennessee, the Virginia state recovery authorities because I just don't think they're any good at this.
Yeah, that's right. It's just one failure after another, uh, and it deserves media scrutiny. So rather than be dismissive and just try to do a fact check and say, "Oh no, this particular rumor is wrong," let's really look at what they're doing and why are things not getting to the people they need to get to. I agree. Places, groups like Samaritan's Purse, do an amazing job. Governor Ron DeSantis, you should put him in charge. He doing. He was
Okay,
already helping the people of North Carolina.
Vic, I'll look forward to listening to the Getting Hammered podcast for more on this. I do want to get your sense of the election very quickly. Victor Davis Hanson, whom I admire a great deal, enormous respect for, believes that Harris is behind and that her what support she has is going to slowly erode over the next 30 days because you just can't cover up the incompetence and the unpreparedness. What do you think?
I think it's definitely a race against the clock. I mean, again, they want to run out the clock because she has this momentum that developed. If you remember, she had a double honeymoon bounce. Right, there was the announcement that she was going to be, the new nominee, and then of course she had the convention, and everybody, and she's riding those coattails because she's so amazing in every imaginable way. And then we get into it, and there's not really any there. They know that, and I think the American people have a general sense that she's not the smartest person, at the top of the ticket. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who do not like Donald Trump, and if she could just say it, if she could give lip service that she won't ban fracking or she's not going to support sex change operations for illegals and inmates, then they may be able to convince themselves to vote for her. But if you
You know,
look
I
around
saw
what's
that
happening,
ad yesterday
no,
during the Browns getting blown out by the Commanders. The
yeah.
new Trump ad on sex change with Kamala Harris talking to a transgendered activist saying, yes, we'll pay for every. I was the attorney general and I could order that done, and we're going to pay for every inmate who wants the transition surgery. I don't know why it was playing in Maine, but it was. Maybe it was a national ad. Do you think that works?
Well, if you have any belief that the American people have any common sense left, then yes, it's going to work. But I don't know. I honestly don't know. I know a lot of people. I've spoken to people who say, "Well, you know what? I think it's time for we finally need our first woman president, so it's going to be her." I mean, it's amazing that some people think that way, but they do. And they're not
Yeah.
going to get into the actual details here, but I mean, I just read a great reported story from the Philadelphia Inquirer about all these working class, voters in Philadelphia, deep in center city, who are now saying they're going to vote for Trump. And what they say is they keep on being warned that Trump is going to be is it going to be a disaster for the economy? And the guy is quoted as saying, "Look, he was already president. My taxes were lower." I mean, for me, that's the ball game right there.
And I didn't have 22% across the board inflation. Vic Mattis, follow him at Victorino Mattis on X. Go and watch and listen to Call Me Back. Not Call Me Back, that's Dan Senor's podcast. Getting
Also
Hammered,
good.
that's
Also
Vic
good.
and Mary Catherine's podcast. Getting Hammered. Thank you, Vic. I greatly appreciate it. Coming up later in the program, former President Trump returns to the Hugh Hewitt Show, so do not miss that. Selena Zito, who's my guest, saw the former president on Saturday when she was with him in Butler, as well as Elon Musk. She's written up her interview of Elon Musk for the Washington Examiner. I just posted it on X. Good morning, Selena. You just got to
Good
hold
morning.
forth and tell us about Saturday on in Butler.
Well, Saturday on in Butler began for me and a lot of other people at about 6 in the morning, where people were. I mean, it was a 2 mile or a two, yeah, 2 mile wait in line with cars and about an hour wait getting into the parking lot. And the line of
Jeez.
people was already at least 3/4 of a mile long. It was massive. It went the whole airstrip. Butler Farm Show Complex has a tiny, in comparison to a big airport, airstrip right there, and it was lined all the way down to the highway. And the mood was very festive. People were very, very excited to be there. There were people, it was sort of divided into three camps: people who were there the first time and felt that wanted to be there again to see what they didn't get to see, to see what he didn't get to finish, right? There were also people there from all over, Erie, Ohio, all over Western Pennsylvania. And then there was sort of the pilgrimage people. I interviewed a man who drove 4 days from California, someone who drove several hours from North Carolina. Usually it's about a seven hour drive. It took him 15 hours because of navigating the destruction that's happened in Western North Carolina. We're more geographically aligned with Western North Carolina. So, it was a lot. It was emotional. People were excited. Some people stood out there for 10 hours. Now, it didn't get to 100 degrees like it was the first time, but it was up in the 70s and the sun was pretty relentless. So
So
all in
tell me
all, it's
about talking to Elon Musk. I have not interviewed Elon Musk, so tell me what it's like.
oh, he's very nice, very charismatic. It wasn't planned interview. I was in the back holding area, which was basically a part of the farm show complex with like lots of dirt and chicken coops and and stacks of hay. It was a really interesting visual. And I was interviewing President Trump, and we were talking about East Palestine and sort of that 30-mile um piece of geography of people that you and I both know very well, respond to Trump. And Musk was there, and ended up interviewing him, and we talked about sort of the freedom of speech and how that was important, but also about how elites, in the same way, did not get the working class, the middle class, the middle of America, being attracted to Trump's message. They also don't get being attracted to Musk. They find that to be incredibly, they don't understand it. But, he's a guy who makes things. That's very appealing to the working class. He is also a disruptor, also very important to the working class, who feel as though that the establishment doesn't see them, but that he does.
Selena, do you
And
get
he,
the sense that Elon Musk has ever been to Warren or Youngstown or Niles or Sharon or Erie? Do you think he has any clue about the land?
yeah, absolutely. He literally had to drive through places like that to get to Butler. From they landed at the Pittsburgh airport, and there's no straight line to Butler. He was through all those kinds of places, and I know this is going to break your heart, but he was twirling a terrible towel last night at the Steeler game.
You didn't have to bring that up. We're not going to hold that against Elon. I just want you to pitch him on building something in Warren. I'd like him to put a data center or a Starlink or some Tesla factory out at Lordstown, which used to make cars when GM was not a shell of its former self. Now,
Yeah.
at the end of the rally, what is your sense of Pennsylvania and President Trump? That picture, of course, was extraordinary, but it's still a rally. It doesn't tell us about Scranton. It doesn't tell us about Philadelphia. What's your sense of the entire state right now?
My sense has always been that he had, meaning former President Trump, had the edge. She's always been Biden. If it was Biden, he had already lost the support of the people that had gone over to him towards COVID, during COVID, and that year that was a bit of a fluke. And she has never been a good fit in Pennsylvania, very much in the same way that Hillary Clinton was not a good fit. These are both candidates that weren't aspirational speakers in the way that Barack Obama was, and had never had to win a Republican vote or a conservative Democrat vote to win an election. She doesn't know how to connect.
Well, I must say, I have never seen pictures like that crowd. Extraordinary event. This morning's news item says that there are only really 24 competitive races in the House of Representatives. One of them is Wisconsin 3, where Derek Van Orden, the newly elected Republican serving his first term, is battling to defend against a tidal wave of black dark money coming after him. Good morning, Congressman. It's good to have you back. Tell us about the battle in Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District.
Well, good morning, Hugh. It's great to be here. You called it, man. You called the ball. We're in a slugfest right here. We've got millions of dollars coming in from these dark PACs and super PACs. And what's interesting is that the person I'm running against was on the board of one of them. And I'm not sure that that's ethical or legal. But yeah, I'm running against a Democrat that is claiming to be just a farm girl, and she was raised on a farm, but then she disappeared for about 20 years. Turned out that she was a fundraiser for extremists in California and Minnesota, and she still owns a political consulting company. So, honest to goodness, I'm running against Tim Waltz here in Wisconsin. Just absolutely untruthful about her background and willing to do anything she can to get personal political power. And Wisconsinites, we just don't want that. We want someone that's going to tell the truth about their background, go to Washington, D.C. and fight for them, not for Nancy Pelosi and George Soros.
Now, Derek, the website is vanordenforcongress.com, vanordenforcongress.com. I am curious how much you're getting in-state and how much is coming from out-of-state. A lot of people love a seal, but a lot of people love you because you are very, very upfront and direct with not only your constituents, but the whole country.
Yes, it's time for truth-telling. People want to hear the truth. And honest to goodness, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't care what your pronouns are. They don't. And the Biden administration has run our military into the ground. The border is wide open. President Trump came to my hometown about a mile away from here because a member of the Tre de Aragua, the Venezuelan international gang, was let into the country with gang tattoos, went to Minnesota, up to Minneapolis, and got rolled up, but was released because they're a sanctuary city. The sheriff in Dane County, which is incredibly liberal, had a bunch of warrants out for this guy's arrest for things including strangulation. Then he made his way here to Little Prairie du Chien and brutalized a mother and her daughter over a period of days. So these things just didn't need to happen. We've got the folks who are coming here that are destroying our nation intentionally under Harris border czardom. It's having a telling effect, and we simply don't want that here. We want a secure, prosperous, and safe America.
Now, Congressman Kamala Harris is on 60 Minutes tonight. Last night, the vice president, there were clips released in which she refuses to say Netanyahu is an ally. You have been in combat. Do you know who your allies are when you're in combat?
Unquestionably.
What do you think of?
So today,
what do you think of Netanyahu?
I think he's done more to help protect America in the last 3 months than Biden did in the last 4 years. So Benjamin Netanyahu is defending his people, and he is attacking the people that hate America. They're responsible for killing the person that bombed our barracks in Beirut and killed so many Marines and actually civilians also. So he is doing what we should have been doing, and that is ruthlessly rooting out the people that want to destroy us for who we are. And today is the 1 year anniversary of the water. And
Go
Hugh,
ahead, Congressman.
I was the first member of the United States government and the only member of the United States government that was in Israel immediately following the attacks, unless they were stationed there. And I went there for some very specific reasons. I knew that the international community was going to turn their back on Israel. I knew that the Biden administration was going to turn their back on Israel, and they have. And we simply cannot do that. The Israeli people don't just simply have the right to exist. They have the right to live in peace and freedom. And we have to clearly acknowledge that. They're our strongest, most trustworthy ally in the most troubled region of the world, and they have been for decades.
Now, Congressman Van Orden, President Trump is coming up next hour on the program. He can tell people himself what he thinks about Israel. I am curious about Wisconsin and whether you think you're going to win, Eric Hovde's going to win, and Donald Trump's going to win in Wisconsin.
We are. We are going to win because this election is about gas, groceries, and grandkids. The American public cannot afford the first two anymore, and we're worried about the future for our children and our grandchildren. And President Trump has a proven record of making life better for American citizens, period. And I have a very solid record of really bipartisanship in Congress, making sure that I represent all of my constituents. President Trump represents all Americans. Eric Hovde is going to do the same thing. I've known him for years, and he's a very good man. So the worm has turned, and people now truly understand that this election is so incredibly important that if we lose this election, I'm not sure what's going to happen to the United States after that. If you look at what the Biden-Harris, or I call it the Harris-Harris administration, has done to this country over the years, it may be irrecoverable if they get 4 more years in power. And Americans
You
know
know,
that.
Congressman, I tell people, I don't think the Republic will end, but I think we will lose our ability to keep pace with the People's Republic of China, and that Xi Jinping will go for our throat. Not invading, not destroying, but simply our economic throat, and that we won't get that advantage. But he will take Taiwan. But do you agree with my assessment? We will lose superpower status relative to China if Harris is elected.
Well, you can argue that we already have. So Xi Jinping is doing what he wants in the Asia Pacific region, the Indo-Pacific region. And there's nothing right now we can seemingly do to thwart that. The United States Navy was incapable of manning 11 ships. Those were 4 deployed supply ships, but without those, we can't move material. And if the Navy can't man their ships, then China's going to have their way in the Indo-Pacific region. So they're very, very serious players. I cannot imagine Kamala Harris or Waltz sitting across the table from Xi Jinping trying to negotiate the freedom of Taiwan. Can you?
No. Now, I can't imagine her sitting down with Putin, sitting down with Xi, sitting down with anybody, actually. I think probably the president of Mexico will get the better of her in terms of Mexican-U.S. relations on border. Let me close this way, Derek. Small dollars matter, but it's best if the people, you explain it to them why. I think you're in an expensive district. Tell people about it.
Yes, I'm in a very expensive district. There's going to be probably $30 or $40 million spent in this race in southwestern Wisconsin because the Democrats want the seat back. So people need to go to vanordenforcongress.com, vanordenforcongress.com, and every dollar helps. I have 4 media markets in this district, and in order to get the truth out, we have to pay for advertising. It's just that simple. If people go to vanordenforcongress.com, they're going to see who I am. They're going to be able to contribute to this campaign, and they're going to be able to fight for the freedom. Also, I want people to go out and vote early. President Trump hopefully will be saying that to you later today. So get out and vote early so that we can apply our limited resources to the folks who haven't voted yet and make sure that they understand the truth so they can get out and vote and fight for their country in the ballot box. That's what we want people to do. We want them to fight.
You know, you're the first one to explain why early voting. I've had a lot of candidates on. They all say vote early, but you just nailed it. So I want you to repeat it. When someone votes, the campaigns know, and then they don't have to send a volunteer. They don't have to make a phone call. They don't have to get the car. They've banked your vote, and they can go elsewhere. That's the first time someone said that on the air.
Let me do it in 30 seconds. So there's high propensity and low propensity voters. If you're a high propensity voter, Hugh is, and you're a Republican, I can see that you voted. I can't see who you voted for, but I can see that Hugh Hewitt voted. I don't have to apply resources to him, and I can go to Hugh's neighbor, who is a low propensity Republican voter, and make sure that they understand what's going on so that they can vote. Therefore, I save resources. We are fiscally responsible Republicans, and that is a fiscally responsible thing to do.
It's so smart to do. But Derek Van Orden, keep coming back. VanOrdenForCongress.com. Get them some hard dollars. Hard dollars go a lot farther than soft dollars. Yeah, there's big money flowing in. But if VanOrdenForCongress.com gets enough small dollar donors, $25, $50, $100, $200, whatever you can, he will stretch that. It goes much farther than the dark money does. Thank you, Congressman Van Orden. Senator Joni Ernst represents the great state of Iowa. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Hugh. Thank you for having me.
Next hour, former President Trump will be joining me. We're going to talk about the election, obviously. How do you feel about his election opportunity right now?
Well, I think it is looking great, honestly, Hugh. I do know and acknowledge it will be a close race, but I think the more people learn about Kamala Harris and actually get to know her and her failures in this last administration, the better it is for Donald Trump. He is running on his record, which was absolutely fabulous. And I know we're going to talk about October 7th. But when we had Donald Trump in office, he brokered the Abraham Accords, which brought peace and stability to the Middle East. And right now, folks, we have the world on fire because of the lack of leadership from President Biden and Kamala Harris.
Now, Senator, it's last night. 60 Minutes released some clips of their interview, which will be on tonight with Vice President Harris. I want to play the first one for you on this 10/7 anniversary. It's been 1 year since the massacre. Here's what Bill Whitaker's first question about that was to Kamala Harris, cut number 2.
We supply Israel with billions of dollars in military aid. Mm-hmm. And yet Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. He has promised to make Iran pay for the missile attack, and that has the potential of expanding the war. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The aid that we have given Israel allowed Israel to defend itself against 200 ballistic missiles that were just meant to attack the Israelis and the people of Israel. And when we think about the threat that Hamas, Hezbollah presents, Iran, I think that it is without any question our imperative to do what we can to allow Israel to defend itself against those kinds of attacks. Now, the work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles, which include the need for humanitarian aid, the need for this war to end, the need for a deal to be done which would release the hostages and create a ceasefire. And we're not going to stop in terms of putting that pressure on Israel and in the region, including Arab leaders.
All right, so Senator Ernst, the Bill Whitaker framing is strange indeed, but what did you make of the vice president's response?
Well, let me boil it down for you. Do they have influence over Israel? No, they don't. There is no relationship between President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They are so weak, they have not been leading. So that's another word salad coming from Kamala Harris. Let's just be very straight about it. I was in the Middle East about a month and a half ago, my 4th trip since October 7th. And one of the Arab leaders that really does want to see peace in that region, he told me straight up, I have given up on the United States of America. Now, Hugh, how sad is that to hear that from one of our closest friends, Arab leaders in the Middle East, that he has given up on us because Kamala Harris can't exhibit leadership. She doesn't influence any of these leaders. And let's compare and contrast again with the strength that came under Donald Trump. Many of those Arab leaders respected Donald Trump because they knew he would do what was necessary. And you know he doesn't like war, but what did he do to deter war? He absolutely had a strong posture against those that went against the United States and our allies. So let me boil it down again. No, this administration, Kamala Harris, has no influence over any of those leaders in the Middle East.
All right, let me play 2 more clips from the 60-minute excerpts that were released yesterday. Cut number 3 and 4 back to back, please, Harley.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes.
This is Aspen Institute gobbledygook, Senator. This is not hard power. This is not leadership.
No, you blah, 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 blah. Thank you so much, Kamala Harris, for your feckless lack of leadership. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu is a close partner to the United States. The problem is we have a leader who will not work with him and allow him the opportunity to defend his country. So you know what? Israel has gone it alone. Yes, we do continue to provide them most of what they need in their defense, but they got tired of waiting on the United States to stand up for Israel, stand up for that region. Because, folks, it is not just Israel that is threatened by Iran. It is all of these Arab nations that want to turn to the West. They want America to lead, and yet we are not leading. So Kamala Harris, you can hear a little quaver in her voice because, again, she just doesn't even know how to answer this because there is no relationship between this administration and the leadership in Israel, and that is a crying shame. They are the only democracy in that region. We should be tight, shoulder to shoulder, no room between the two of us as we push back against Iran. So the bottom line here is it's the Harris administration, the Biden-Harris administration, that has been appeasing Iran since day one under this ridiculous JCPOA, the nuclear deal brokered by Obama. They tried to go back to that. They have let up on sanctions. So out of one side of their mouth, they'll say, we have sanctions against Iranian oil. And on the other side of the mouth, they'll say, well, don't enforce them. We just won't enforce them. Let them sell their oil. They have enriched Iran to the tune of $100 million, and all of that, $1 billion. And all of that has flowed to the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. And now, because of this feckless lack of leadership, we have not just these terrorist proxies going against Israel. Now we see strikes directly from Iran going into Israel. Twice now. Once in April, once in the last couple of weeks. This has never occurred in history before. And yet we see it under the Biden-Harris administration. So
Senator Ernst,
they're a disaster.
After one of her inanities that she's done during this campaign, I was on Special Report with Brett, and I said, I don't think she has a thought in her head. And a has-been never Trumper thought that was sexist. So I'm going to turn to you. One of her colleagues for 4 years in the Senate and a woman on an XY graph, with X being the skill sets necessary to be president from 0 to 100, and Y being just raw intelligence so that you can learn new stuff and adopt and grow. Where is Vice President Harris relative to your colleagues in the Senate?
Well, that's a really good question because you pointed out that, I was her colleague for a number of years in the Senate, but I don't remember her ever reaching out to any of us to work with any of us in the Senate. Can somebody please give me an accomplishment of hers that came out of the Senate? Because I just can't find them. So can I rate her intelligence? No, Hugh, I can't because I don't know that she worked in the Senate. That's a problem, folks. That is a problem.
Okay, you're a Midwesterner. Let's talk about Governor Walz. I didn't think, I'm kind of a Midwesterner. I'm from Ohio, and you spell it Iowa, but we both like Minnesota, but I generally don't think that most Minnesotans lie this way. And he's got just a record of lying.
Yeah, he is an absolute liar. Let's not make it soft and gentle by calling him a knucklehead. He is a flat out liar. The man was running on this great National Guard record, and I appreciate everyone's service. But don't lie about it. You don't have to lie about it. Just say you served in the National Guard, period. Don't talk about carrying weapons in war when obviously you never deployed. Now, I deployed overseas. I am a combat veteran. But I was a truck driver. You know, I led some of the most fantastic truck drivers. I had great mechanics. I had great supply sergeants. I don't need to embellish it. I didn't, run around fighting hand to hand with Iraqis, but darn, we provided a great service to the war fighters. What is wrong with saying I was a great combat veteran? I didn't fight hand to hand with anybody, but I was a great combat veteran. You know, he can't even claim that because he ditched his unit and retired the moment they found out they were going to be deployed. Just simply say, I served in the Minnesota National Guard. Good for you. Don't say you retired as a sergeant major because you absolutely didn't. The man is a liar, people.
All right, Senator, I've got one last question,
Oh.
which is my most concerning one. If Harris were to win, I believe we would fall behind the People's Republic of China. We couldn't keep pace, and I don't think we can close that gap. That's my real fear about a Harris-Walz presidency. What is yours?
My fear is that the world is on fire and it's just going to absolutely explode if she becomes president. Yes, we will fall behind the Chinese. We will be focused more on DEI and wokeness in the military than actually having a competitive edge and training our troops the way they need to be trained as war fighters, as people who want to defend our nation. I think recruitment would go down even further. This military is so demoralized under President Biden and Kamala Harris. And I know you said you would be talking maybe recruitment challenges. It starts at the top, and we need a leader that can inspire, and that's Donald J. Trump.
Horrific anniversary of a horrific day, the first anniversary of 10/7. Bethany Mandel joins us now. Bethany, it's the High Holy Days. Let me give you an anticipatory. May you have an easy fast on Friday for Yom Kippur. What are your thoughts on this, the first anniversary of 10/7?
It's really painful. I was thinking back last night of all the families I've gotten to know over the course of the last year, helping them navigate this unimaginable reality with media that they were thrust into. And God, they were so strong, but the stories are still, I mean, we're 12 months out, still so unimaginable. I was thinking about one young woman, Adi Vital. She was on a kibbutz in the south, and she was alone with her two young children, her 4-year-old and her 6-month-old, and she was killed in front of them, and her children were kidnapped into Gaza, and they were so injured by shrapnel that they were crying too much, and the terrorists decided to leave her children there, and a neighbor happened to see them. She was hiding in a nearby area, and she grabbed them and ran them back into Israel. These are the stories. These are the people who are living with everything, and hostage families are still in so much turmoil and limbo, but there's thousands of families in Israel that have been irrevocably shattered.
Bethany, I'm glad you reminded us of them and to pray for them. I asked Dan Senor earlier about the impact of the last year on his teenage boys, and it was pretty interesting and very reflective. What's been the impact on your children to the extent they understand that they're not welcome in many places in the world because they're Jewish?
Yeah, it's been difficult. I went to Paris with my older three children earlier this summer, and none of my boys were yarmulkes. And I went through all the clothes that they had picked out to pack to make sure that there was nothing Hebrew or Jewish on the t-shirts that they had packed. And I realized we have a lot of t-shirts from summer camp. But it's been very difficult. My oldest daughter, she's almost 11 in a couple days. Her birthday was ruined by this last year, and determined not to let that happen again. She got to know one of the brothers of a hostage, and I had to sit her down and tell her that Carmel Gott had been murdered a couple weeks ago. It was a really, really difficult conversation because she understood intellectually what had happened, but she grew to have an emotional attachment to one of these individuals. And her murder was barbaric, the likes of which I couldn't even imagine as an adult. And so it's really been innocence stealing for my oldest daughter. But for my oldest three children, I would say it's been very difficult.
Do you think that you and Seth and your children are going to be more secure in the future in Israel or in the United States?
I mean, I think it depends on the day, and I think it depends on the president. I'm glad that you're having President Trump on later today. He is visiting. I don't know if he'll say this on air, so I will say it. He's visiting a very holy rabbinic grave in Brooklyn today, and that really sends a signal and a message to the American Jewish community, and I hope they're listening to it. That that site is very obscure to non-Jews, but to Jews it's a very holy place. And for him to appreciate that and recognize that and decide to spend this anniversary there is very telling. I'm grateful for it.
What did you make of Vice President Harris's remarks about Netanyahu and Israel last night to 60 Minutes?
So I actually was happy with a lot of them. But sort of pleasantly surprised. My expectations were so low that she did surpass them. And she said, he tried to put her on the spot and repudiate Netanyahu. And she said, the partnership between Israel and America is ironclad. And that is appreciated. But time and time again, when Israel is attacked, like they were last week by Iran, the message sent to the Israeli government is you have to exercise caution and restraint. And she echoed a lot of those sentiments on 60 Minutes, whereas President Trump is peace through strength. That is his motto, and that kept us safe over the course of his presidency. And he got hit so hard for saying October 7th never would have happened on my watch, but he was right.
Bethany, I am surprised by your answer, and we'll leave it here. But it would give you the last word because she said in the course of talking with 60 Minutes that not just about the Netanyahu stuff, but that we need a deal. There isn't going to be a deal with Hamas. Not only are they almost all destroyed, they're fanatics.
Yes. Yeah, no, there is no deal on the table, and this is something that anti-Netanyahu people in Israel have conjured up in their fever dreams that if just Netanyahu would agree to the deal, there is no deal on the table. I wish that there were. I wish that there were a way to bring home 101 precious souls back to Israel. Four of them are Americans. I wish there were a way to bring them back on the table. There is not. They are fanatics. They are worse than ISIS. They are evil.
On that note, I think that is the clarity that we need on 10/7/24 that we really ought to have had on 10/6/23, and unfortunately we did not. Bethany Mandel, follow her on X at Bethany Shondark. Thank you for joining me this morning and every week. My guest, Senator Roger Wicker, is the ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He's posted a statement this morning, which I thought was very moving. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back. It is a dark day to remember, but I'm glad that you have done so online and are joining me this morning. Former President
Peter,
Trump
thanks.
is coming along at the bottom of the hour to do the same.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to do it.
Senator, my biggest fear about a Harris presidency, I think Donald Trump's going to win, but if he didn't, is that we would fall so far behind China that we could not catch up again. Do you share my fear?
Well, if it's any indication of how her party has done with their leader in the U.S. Senate, yes, it is very much a concern. Every time we wanted to spend a few extra dollars to a few percentage points of our huge economy to defend ourselves, the Democrats say, well, we won't do that unless we can increase domestic spending too. So it's been like pulling teeth.
Now, Senator, we absolutely have to expand shipbuilding. You have a plan. I recently went down the Kennebec River past 3 of the Zumwalt class destroyers, and they're great ships, but there are only 3 of them.
That's right, and China has 200 times the Navy shipbuilding capacity we do. When you talk about we need to increase our number of fighter jets or submarines or warships, some people say, well, we don't even have the industrial capacity. We don't have enough manufacturing plants. And of course, the answer to that is let's get some. We're going to have to increase our national defense to keep us out of a war. The idea is to keep the peace. By being so strong, nobody will take a chance on us.
There were 7 during World War II. There were 7 shipyards in the Kennebec. Now there's 1. If you're the chairman of Armed Services, if the Republicans win, and Senator Collins is the chairman of Appropriations, what do you expect we'll see in terms of a Pentagon budget increase?
Well, of course, we're going to need very much a president who is in charge of the Office of Management and Budget. That's the main entity that we've had to fight on this. But what we need to do, and what I've advocated, and what military experts, past and present, are saying is we need to go back to Ronald Reagan's peace through strength, and that does involve about 5% of our economy used to get us ready to defend ourselves in a war. We can spend 95% of our funds elsewhere, but if we spend 5% of our gross domestic product on defending America, we can save hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars by staying out of a war.
Senator Wicker, there's the CHIPS Act is on the table in the Senate. There's the Area 52 plan to turn Lake Michigan into the modern equivalent of testing our underwater submersibles. There's the need for submarine construction. How soon can we get any and all of that done? I mean, how fast can we go?
We can go faster, and here's an example. We gave $3.4 billion in a supplemental bill to help increase our submarine industrial base. The fact is, we really haven't seen much action in the 9 or 10 months since that was enacted. So, we're going to need to provide the funds, and the U.S. Congress it does have the power of the purse. After that, it's up to the administration to implement that. And the last time our Senate Republicans met with President Trump, he was very clear that he shared our determination to increase our Navy and get it back up to the point where we're able to protect America and deter somebody from attacking us.
Do there have to
that
be?
That was very much of an encouraging statement from President Trump.
Do there have to be serious authorizations in a reconciliation process, for example, for the Pentagon to clear away its contracting obstacles? Because it's a mess. It's 50 years of accumulated barnacles on contracting, and it's a mess.
You're absolutely right, and we see that in what's going on with our allies around the world, whether it be the assistance that we're providing to the people in Ukraine trying to protect their borders, or the assistance we're providing to the international Jewish community to try to protect the one Jewish state in the world. It is a very cumbersome bureaucratic system, and it needs to be speeded up. Frankly, what we need to do is we need to the administration needs to send some of our best military experts into these industrial complexes and help them figure out a way to get the job done quicker. And I've made the suggestion to Jake Sullivan: pick 100 high-ranking defense industrial experts and tell these big companies we will send them into your factories and shipyards and help you figure out a way to do this quicker.
So, Senator, you mentioned Israel, and we are, of course, commemorating 10/7 today, and I'll do so with former President Trump when he's on at the bottom of the hour. I want to ask you about the upcoming retaliation against Iran. All President Biden has said is you can't hit this, you can't hit that, don't think about this. Is that any way to support our ally?
It is no way to support our allies. And remember this, the attack 1 year ago today was an attack on a civilian concert with Americans present and killed at the concert. 1,200 innocent civilians were killed in the most brutal way. Babies were burned alive. I'm sorry I'm having to say this publicly. women were raped, people were beheaded in an animalistic terrorist raid meant to shock the Israelis, I suppose, into leaving the area. There's no way, after all the Israelis have encountered over 70 years and all the things the Jewish people have encountered over the centuries, there's no way Israel is going to give up its right to that tiny little piece of real estate in the Middle East. And so, as a matter of fact, I think Netanyahu is doing the world a favor by saying, I'm going to totally eliminate these Iranian-backed terrorists, Hamas, the Houthis, that are firing weapons on American ships. And Hezbollah, the largest terrorist group in Lebanon, that's why he's going into Lebanon. And I'll tell you this, Lebanon will be far, far better off when and if Hezbollah is completely removed from their country. Then they can get back to being a self-governing republic again. But right now, this Iranian-backed terrorist group is basically running Lebanon around by the nose. They really don't have charge of their country.
Now, the parasitical organization that is Hezbollah is going to be reduced by Israel, I hope, to the point that Lebanon can reassert its sovereignty against Iran. Senator Wicker, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to your service as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee in the next Senate if people vote the right way.
Good to be back. Good to be back on Salem Radio with you.
Thank you, sir. Coming up after the news, weather, and traffic at the bottom of the hour, former President Trump will be joining me. If you are away from, you get out of your car, you can always watch on the Salem News Channel. You can watch or listen at hughhewitt.com. And, of course, all of the conversation, both on air and off air, will be on my podcast today, and more of it will play tomorrow. We'll post the transcript just as soon as Dwayne can get it ready for you. I do want to play for the opening of President Trump at Butler, Pennsylvania, because the crowd is extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it at a political event. And I've been doing this since 1974. Really, never seen anything like it. And, of course, at the last Butler, Pennsylvania rally, he was shot. Corey Compatore was killed. 2 other people were wounded. The assassin, would-be assassin of the president and the assassin of Corey, was killed. And the president turned his head to point at a screen. That's the background for this clip, cut number 5.
As I was saying, oh, I love that. I love that chart. I love that graph. Isn't it a beautiful thing? But also beautiful because look at the number. That's the day I left office. It was the lowest. Border Patrol, the lowest it's ever been. Illegal immigration, today it's out of control. But I love it for other reasons, too. You know that. So thank you very much, and thank Lee and what Lee has done with that song. And it's such an honor to have it. I want to just let you know that tonight I return to Butler in the aftermath of tragedy and heartache to deliver a simple message to the people of Pennsylvania and to the people of America. Our movement to make America great again stands stronger, prouder, more united, more determined, and nearer to victory than ever before. We're going to make America great again. Going to win the election. Going to win the election. And to all Americans, whether you are Republican, Democrat, Independent, Conservative, or Liberal, or you have no label whatsoever, it makes no difference. Our movement, it belongs to you. It belongs to our country. It belongs to our country. And together in just 1 month, we are going to usher in a new golden age of American security, prosperity, sovereignty, and freedom for our citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. Exactly 12 weeks ago this evening on this very ground, a cold-blooded assassin aimed to silence me and to silence the greatest movement, MAGA, in the history of our country, MAGA. We love MAGA. For 16 harrowing seconds during the gunfire, time stopped as this vicious monster unleashed pure evil from his sniper's perch, not so far away. But by the hand of Providence and the grace of God, that villain did not succeed in his goal, did not come close. He did not stop our movement. He did not break out our spirit. He did not shake our unyielding resolve to save America from evils of poverty, hatred, and destruction.
I think the former president went on and had an extraordinary day. Elon Musk was with him. Contrast that with Tim Walz bumbling his way. My gosh, the guy is a bumbler, buffoon. Cut number 10 on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream yesterday.
You've modified your story or explained that you misspoke about things involving your military rank, about carrying a weapon in war, your 1995 DUI arrest, using IVF to have your beautiful children, Gus and Hope, being in Hong Kong and China in the summer of 1989 during the Tiananmen events. A lot of people would say they couldn't get away with saying, I'm just too passionate, my grammar's not right, I'm a knucklehead. What do you say to the American people who think, I don't know that I can trust this guy with all those modifications to be the potential commander-in-chief of this country?
Yeah, well, I think they heard me. They heard me the other night speaking passionately about gun violence and misspeaking. And I got to be honest with you, Shannon, I don't think people care whether I used IUI or IVF when we talk about this. What they understand is Donald Trump would
Actually,
those
I
things.
do. I do care. I think a lot of people care. A lot of people believe he's a serial liar. I am among them. I do care. I understand he did misspeak. I don't hammer him for misspeaking about I'm friends with school shooters. That was an obvious malapropism and assaultism. But I'll tell you this. He is a serial liar, as Joni Ernst said. Joined now by former and I think future President Donald Trump. Mr. President, welcome back. It's great to have you. I appreciate very much your joining me on 10/7, the anniversary of that horrible day.
Right. That was a horrible day. Should have never happened. It would never have happened, guaranteed. Even Democrats admit it. I saw some congressman the other day said that wouldn't have happened. And whether we like it or not, the attack by Russia on Ukraine would not have happened. But it did happen, and it happened as bad as there was. It was just an incredible bad thing. And it'll get straightened out. It's been amazing to see what's happening now. But
now, Mr. President, when we spoke in April, you said to me that Israel needed to win and win quickly. They are winning, but they're still fighting, and they're now fighting in Lebanon. Do you think Biden and Harris have been holding back Israel from winning?
I do. I think everything they do is the opposite. In particular, him. Now, she's a dumber person than him, but he has the worst foreign policy of anybody in history, probably. You know what you do with him? I realized it the other day. He could be one of the greatest foreign policy presidents. All you do is listen to what he says and do the opposite. If you've done the opposite for 30 years with this poor guy, this poor, pathetic guy, if you've done the opposite for 30 years, you would have been successful. But he's never gotten it right. And, you know, I don't have to go back into the old secretaries of states and all the people that talk about
Secretary
it.
Gates said that for 40 years. Now
well,
it's up to
did.
45.
Others, him and others did. Everybody did. Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong. All you do is do whatever he said. Don't get Bin Laden. He said.
Yes, he did.
Wrong that he's done.
Now, Iran has rained ballistic missiles down on Israel twice, on April 13th and, of course, October 1st. If Netanyahu told you when you're back in the White House and it happened again, I've got to hit I've got to hit Iran at X, Y, and Z sites, would you do what Biden did? Well, you can't hit this, you can't hit that. I mean, would you try and micromanage Israel?
Well, first of all, he's the one, Biden is the one with her, and she was very much involved, that gave us the worst withdrawal in the history of withdrawals of any kind, and that's Afghanistan. That was the worst, most embarrassing day in the history of our country, and they were saying, do it this way. They took the soldiers out first, you know. We had a strong agreement, and if they didn't do the agreement, and they didn't, so what we would do is we'd hold them in abeyance, and we did numbers. They were perfect. But then when we were out, what he did, is incredible. He took the military out first, and you take them. Remember, I called a child up to the stage one time during a rally. A little kid who was 5 or 6 years old. They said, I gave him the facts. I said, so would you take the military out first or last? Sir, I take the military out last. He was 5 years old. They moved his stupid Millie, who was a dumb guy. He was the one that says, let's leave all the equipment, all that beautiful brand new military. Let's leave it in Afghanistan. We're going to leave it in Afghanistan so that they have $85 billion worth of equipment. He was a dumb guy. I knew that early on. I knew that. So what you have to do with them is sort of listen to it, because you always have to listen to a president, and then you have to do whatever you want. Now, Bibi was held up a little bit because psychologically, you have a president. He probably maybe would have been further along, but he's pretty far along. He's not listening at all. They don't even speak.
Yeah, well, I right now Biden is talking through the media. Don't hit the oil refinery. Don't hit the nuclear sites. Do you think that's wise, or would you tell Netanyahu to do what he needs?
Did you ever hear of anyone say, "Don't hit the meat"? He's going, "Don't hit the nuclear." They asked him the other day, "Would you hit?" Well, I don't think you should hit the nuclear. I thought it was the opposite. Okay, I sort of thought it was the opposite. The nuclear is the biggest single problem the world has, not global warming, where the ocean will rise 1/8 of an inch in the next 500 years. These people are crazy. The biggest problem we have is nuclear warming, not global warming. And the nuclear, people can't have the nuclear. The nuclear is the power. I rebuilt our entire nuclear force, and our nuclear is the best in the world. And Russia's right behind us. But you know what? I'll tell you, you never want to use it. If you have to use it, it's obliteration. It's a dangerous thing. And Iran is very close to getting it. They would have never had it with me. I would have had a deal a long time ago because they were bust. They were totally bust. They were ready to make a deal. They would have made a deal. And these guys didn't do anything. I mean, we did. When you think of what we did, the Abraham Accords, Golan Heights, we did so much. There's never been a president that was so good to Israel or the Jewish people.
I agree with that. Ambassador Friedman was on last week, and we talked about all that. Let's talk about Iran. I saw Doug Burgum come back from Israel, and the governor went on Fox News, and he said the appeasers, the Biden-Harris appeasers, have taken it so that Hamas got $100 million from Iran in the last year of your presidency, and they're getting $350 million to the military wing of Hamas the year before 10/7. Do you think the American people put that together, that they were broke and out of money and barely able to support their proxies under you, and now they're flush?
They were out of business. I had them out of business. I put, as you know, big sanctions on Iran. I told China, China was the biggest buyer. I said to President Xi directly, I said, look, we're friends. If you buy 1 barrel from Iran, 1 barrel, you don't do business with the U.S. anymore. We go cold turkey, which a lot of people would like to do anyway. And just 1 barrel, plus they're going to put big sanctions on anything that gets through, like 200%. And he said, I'll pass. He passed. Everybody passed. They did no business. They were broke. They had no money. And it was a big story. If you remember, in my 4th year, there was stories all over the place that incredibly, during Trump, there was no, we didn't have one terrorist attack. We had nothing. They had no money. They weren't giving any money because they had no money. They had to survive. And I would have made a fair deal with them. I only wanted one thing. You can't have a nuclear weapon. You cannot let them have a nuclear weapon.
Now, if Israel hits their nuclear sites, will you apply?
I dealt with Kim Jong-un, and he has nuclear weapons. And you tend to speak a little bit differently when they have nuclear weapons. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Well, Nixon met with Mao, who's the greatest murderer of the 20th century, because they had nukes. He met with Brezhnev. I noticed you didn't meet with Khamenei, and he did not have nukes. Can they be allowed to have nukes?
No, they can't have nukes. No, they can't have nukes. Nukes, if you would see the power of these weapons that I renovated and rebuilt at great cost, I rebuilt the whole military, and then they gave $85 billion of it away to the Taliban, to Afghanistan. Can you imagine? They gave $85 billion away. They gave everything. This is the worst group of people. These are the worst negotiators in the history.
Yes, I agree.
Every time somebody gets kidnapped, they give. You ever notice it's like $6 billion every time? If you catch a mountain climber, how about these kids? They go mountain climbing in Iran, they get caught. We pay $6 billion all the time. $6 billion. I paid nothing. I got 58 people out, and I paid nothing. I got tough ones out. I got people out from North Korea. That's a lot tougher, and I paid nothing.
Mr. President, If Israel hits Iran and goes after the nuclear sites, will you applaud Israel and back them up?
Well, you want to do what they want to do. Now, they may be making a deal with Iran right now, to be honest with you, because Iran's not looking so good. Iran is not looking like they looked 2 months ago, if you want to know the truth. They could be making a deal. They could be doing some very smart things right now. There are a lot of things they can do. But the nice thing is they're entitled to an attack, and nobody will be upset if they attack because they're entitled, because Iran hit them with 187 missiles. And by the way, how good is a shield? And the United States should have a shield.
Amen.
If and when I'm elected, we're going to have a shield that is going to be built in the United States. Despite what everyone says, that was our technology that does that. Now,
let me turn to anti-Semitism in the United States. Your daughter is Jewish. Some of your grandchildren are Jewish. Your son-in-law is Jewish. Jewish students are not safe on many American campuses. Your alma mater, my alma mater. Biden and Harris have ignored this. I mean, they really have ignored it. If you're president, will you send the DOJ to those campuses, the Office of Civil Rights from the Department of Education, to enforce the law?
100%. I mean, the law is being broken. 100%. You wouldn't think you even have this. Did you ever think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that you'd ever have this discussion?
No,
it's unbelievable what's happening. And when you see these riots, and you see a lot of people too, but a lot of the people a lot of those people are Jewish people. You know that they're Jewish kids.
Oh yeah, there are some outliers, but mostly Jewish students are afraid to be overt on places like Harvard and Penn.
Students that are afraid. Yes, that's true, and they should be afraid. I've never thought I would see this in my life with the campus riots and what they're saying and what they're doing, and they have to put them down quickly. They really have to put them down quickly.
They need federal help though, and that's the Department of Justice. They need a Department of Justice that will prosecute these people that assault Jewish kids. Because assault is, that's real. That's not a protest. That's not the First Amendment
that's
assault.
Real. That's real. And they're being assaulted. But let me ask you, did you ever think you were going to see this? I mean, I thought this was like semi-ancient stuff, from...
No, we had demonstrations in the 70s and the 80s, but nothing like this.
Did you ever think you were going to see this again?
No.
Mr.
President, you're a developer, so I want to talk to you about Gaza. I worked with land use developers for 35 years when I was actively practicing law. You know how to build things. Gaza is in ruins. Could Gaza be Monaco if it was rebuilt the right way? Could someone make Gaza into something that all the Palestinian people would be proud of, would want to live in, would benefit them?
It could be better than Monaco. It has the best location in the Middle East, the best water, the best everything. It is the best. I've said it for years. When I've been there, and it's rough. It's a rough place before before all of the attacks and before back and forth, what's happened over the last couple of years. And I said, wow, look at this. I mean, they'd have the back of a plant facing the ocean. They'd have there was no ocean as far as that was concerned. They never took advantage of it. As a developer, it could be the most beautiful place. The weather, the water, the whole thing, the climate. It could be so beautiful. It could be the best thing in the Middle East, but it could be one of the best places in the world. And, there are other civilizations. I don't know if you know this. It's crazy, but that's been a rough neighborhood. That's been a rough place. Underneath that are two other civilizations where they were wiped out and they started over and they build on top. It's amazing. I mean,
do you think your
partners? That's been a very contentious area for a long time. I can tell you that.
Can you get the Abraham Accords going again and get your partners like UAE, Bahrain, and possibly Saudi to help you, and Egypt to help you in Gaza if you're president again, to rebuild it the right way and get rid of the fanatics?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I think not only the Abraham Accords, the Abraham Accords is one of the great things that's ever happened in the Middle East. That should be loaded up with everybody right now. And, I made the statement the other day. People said, I would have gotten, in my opinion, 50-50 chance, maybe more than that. Iran would have been in the Abraham Accords. They wanted to make a deal so bad until we had that phony election. They wanted to make a deal so bad that it was and Biden missed the opportunity. Now, then he pours money down their throat, gives them billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, takes the sanctions off. They wanted to make a deal so badly. I would have had everybody, and I believe I would have had Iran. You would have had real peace in the Middle East.
Well, that would have stunned me because I think they're fanatics and you can't deal with them. But let me tell some of my affiliates
You
we're going
could
to a
have dealt
break
with
here.
them when they had no money. I'll tell you.
You're right.
You could have dealt with them when
Now,
they
let
had
me
no
ask
money.
you, Mr. President, about the other side of the world, about China. In the two debates, your debate on ABC and the J.D. Vance's debate on NBC, the name Xi Jinping was not brought up. Are those networks compromised by their need of the China market to be open to them?
Well, they don't bring them up because Biden is compromised by China. He gets a lot of money from China, or he got a lot of money from China, tremendous amount of money, and he's totally compromised. And with China, what he's done with China is amazing. Now, my tariffs that they left, you notice they left my tariffs? You know why? Because they make so much money, and they hold China back from taking our steel industry and other things. You know, we had tariffs on steel. They've left almost all my tariffs. They would love to get rid of them, but tariffs to me is a beautiful word. And I'm not going to. You're not arguing it. I stopped wars with tariffs. Yeah, I had no wars at all, other than I finished off ISIS. The nice part, I got rid of ISIS, and nobody thought they could do that. The ISIS was supposed to take 5 years to get rid of. I got rid of it in a month. We have great military. Let me tell you, we have great generals, not the guys you see on television. That's Milley and Madison, these guys. They are terrible. They're just like fronts. But we have great generals, and we have great soldiers. And they're not woke. Don't think you could put them in a woke machine for 2 years and they'd come out, they wouldn't be woke. These are not woke people. They can't be woke people. Mentally.
But there's a recruitment crisis, Mr. President. The only people that made their number were the Marines. Can you fix that?
It's very easy to fix. They're ashamed of our military. They don't want to be in our military. They did, the whole mandate thing was a disaster for the military. The mandate where they insisted everybody do this and that, that was a disaster for our military. And I met people over the last couple of days. They left the military because of the mandate was a disaster for us. Our military will be fine once you have a president that's intelligent. Okay?
All right. Now, Mr. President, I want to go back to Xi Jinping.
You understand, these people are not intelligent people that are running our country. But President Xi is extremely intelligent. When I say that, the press goes, oh, he called him intelligent. Yeah, he runs 1.4 billion people. He's not, and he runs it with an iron fist. These are very smart people. They're at the top of their game, the leaders of the country. And we have two people that are mentally deficient.
Yeah, you and I have a friend in common in Richard Nixon, and he went and saw Mao, and he went and saw Brezhnev. He met with everyone. He didn't agree with everyone, but he met with everyone. What do you think Kamala Harris would do in a meeting with Xi Jinping or Putin or Kim Jong-un?
Well, it wouldn't be her. She's just a front. There are some vicious communists and vicious fascists and Marxists that are involved in our country. Let me tell you, we have the enemy from within. The enemy from within are bad people in our government, and you see them on occasion. And what about Nancy Pelosi? She owns a lot of Visa stock. They sue Visa, the Department of Justice, or Injustice as I call it, sues Visa and viciously, a big suit. But she sold the stock the day. She had it for years. She sold the stock the day before the lawsuit. Nothing happens to her, and it's hardly a story. She got out. But these are bad people. She's a bad person. I call her Crazy Nancy. She's crazy as a bedbug.
When you see Kamala Harris, though, go on air and say, I'm going to build 3 million houses. I know how to build houses and what goes into it. The EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the state, the local. You develop all over the world. Does she have any idea what the government can't build 3 million houses. They can't build a Lego set.
She's nuts, okay? She's nuts. She's worse than him. Now, he's out of it, and he's been out of it for a long time, and I knew that. I used to talk about that with you, and people said,
Yes, you did.
Talking about? He was out of it, and he was exposed in the debate. If I didn't have that debate, I'd probably be running against him. But I actually think that maybe he would have been tougher than her because they're starting to find out that she's mentally deficient now. And people don't want to have another 4 years of a mentally deficient person.
Well, she also wants to give $25,000 to new home builders. That'll just drive up the price of houses.
That's
and then she
drive
says
the prices up. Yeah, your price is going to be $100,000 more now. No. Everything they want to do is wrong. First of all, you have to let the private sector do it. You just have to let them. She wants to go into government housing. She wants to go into government feeding. She wants to feed people. She wants to feed people governmentally. She wants to go into a communist party type system. When you look at the things that she proposes, they're so far off. She has no clue. How about allowing people to come through an open border, 13,000 of which were murderers? Many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. Now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes, and we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. They had 425,000 people come into our country that shouldn't be here, that are criminals. And one of the worst stats, 325,000 young children are missing. Can you imagine?
It's astonishing what has happened. I can't believe anyone's going to vote for them. Now I want to turn to the campaign, and then I want to turn to Jack Smith. On the campaign, Mr. President, it appears to me that you're going to win Michigan, Michigan has the largest Arab American population in the country. Got a large Jewish American population as well. You're winning both groups. It's like the Arab American Institute said you're tied 42-41 with Kamala Harris among Arab Americans. How can that be? Why are they voting for you and Jewish Americans in greater numbers than ever before?
Because I want to see everything get worked out. I want peace. I don't want to see people killed. I want peace. And they know that, and the Jewish people know that, and both sides like it. And they know I can get peace. I'll get it, just like I did. We had no wars with Trump. There were no wars with Trump. People don't realize it. I took over ISIS, and I decimated ISIS. They were gone in 1 month. It was supposed to take 5 years, according to Mattis. It was supposed to take 5 years. I went over to Iraq, and I worked with some real generals, General Raisin Kane. I had some real generals over there. Lucky I went over there. You get out of Washington, it's actually very good. We have great military. Our military is great. Don't let anyone tell you. It needs help. I rebuilt it, but now we have to do more because they gave so much of it away. They gave so much of it away.
We need so many submarines. We need so many ships. Let me close here, Mr. President. I want to wrap up by 9. The chief legal analyst for CNN is a leftist, liberal, Ellie Honig, former assistant United States attorney for New York, Harvard Law, chief legal analyst for CNN. I want to quote him. The larger, if less obvious headline is that Jack Smith has essentially abandoned any pretense. He'll bend any rule, switch up any practice, so long as he gets to chip away at Trump's electoral prospects. At this point, there's simply no defending Smith's conduct on any sort of principled or institutional basis. I agree 1,000% with it. It's an unconstitutional appointment, as the judge in Florida ruled, but he's trying to influence the election. Do you think anyone notices?
And the judges, too, because the judge should have never let that come out. It was all nonsense anyway. It's just like the other one. Remember the Florida case? They said, that's the biggest case. I won it in totality. It's done. That was the biggest case. I'm winning these things all over. It's pure election interference. Here's the only thing good about it. The public really gets it. My question was, will they get it? They have weaponized the Justice Department, never done before in this country. It's done in third world countries and banana republics. They've weaponized the Justice Department, and the public gets it. And the Supreme Court got it, too. Thank goodness. The Supreme Court.
If you would, last time you were on, you said you were going to put out a list of maybe Supreme Court justices and maybe your national security team. Do you have someone in mind for Attorney General? Because DOJ is on its back. The FBI is on its back, and they're great men and women in both places, but they need leadership at every level.
Well, first of all, if you did a poll in the FBI, I'm at 97%. But that one little flaw I'm not doing too well at. But the agents, they love Trump. They love me so much. They want me back so much. They want to straighten out everything, and we're going to get it straightened out. Look, this is a corrupt administration, the most corrupt administration in history. They're also incompetent. They're grossly incompetent. I mean, when you see Tucker, when you see this, think of this. Hunter Biden is getting $500,000 for a painting. And he sold many of them for $500,000. When that one came up, I said, that's too far. Your famous Where's Hunter? He's selling paintings. That one's too far. That one they can't get away with. They got away with it. Getting $500,000 a painting he never painted before. And he doesn't even do it. He has other people paint them. The whole thing is, this is the most corrupt administration. Do you remember in the debate with him, the original, when I had that lowlife Chris Wallace doing it? And I said, why is he getting $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why? And Chris Wallace wouldn't let me. And he couldn't answer the question. Chris Wallace stepped in and said, well, we're not going to be talking about that. 3 months later, it became a big deal. They were asking the same
Well,
thing.
they closed it out in time. Let me close with Pennsylvania. We're on in Scranton and Philly. We're on in Pittsburgh. We're on in Erie. I want to focus on Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris wants to pretend that she's in favor of fracking. I don't believe her. Fracking depends upon the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She will shut it down quietly. She'll smother it to death. Do you think Pennsylvanians believe her?
I think they don't believe anything she says. Everything she says is a liar. It's a total lie. Look, she had one thing in her resume. It was a big deal. I talk about it a lot because it's so simple for people to understand. I worked at McDonald's, she said. I worked there. Oh, it was so hard. It was so this. I worked there for so long. It was so terrible. She worked over the French fries. Okay, it was so terrible. The heat was so. She never worked there. Okay, that was one of many lies. Now that was a sort of it's bigger a lie than people think. What I like is it's so simple to understand. A lot of her lies, they go around. Although she doesn't lie in a complicated way because her mind doesn't work that way. She's not a smart person. She's a low IQ individual, and this country can't have a low IQ person doing this for another 4 years. We had it for 4 years with him. We can't have a low IQ person. She's a stupid person. We can't have a stupid person as our president. There will be no fracking in Pennsylvania 100%. They'll keep the electric car mandate, which is the dumbest thing anyone's ever heard. All of the things that they want to do, but the worst of all that they're going to keep, we'll end up in World War III. Okay, that's probably
Would you please name your national security team like Grinnell and O'Brien and Cotton?
A lot of the people that you like are going to be there, okay? And I can name all the people that you like, and I like the same people. So you'll have those people, and you'll have more. And the beauty is what I got through, and I had a lot of great people. Lighthizer, I had so many great people.
Oh, Ashabila.
Some of the bad ones, it's nice. I know who they are. I know the good ones, the smart ones. I know the dummies. I know the weak ones. I know the people. When I got there, remember, I was a developer from New York. I took a crash course, and I have great people. We have great
Last
people.
question, Mr. President. A guest earlier told me today you're going to New York, to Brooklyn, to the Rebbe's funeral place. Congratulations. Very smart move on 10/7. It's a somber day. Do you think Israel will recover fully?
I think Israel will recover and maybe recover much stronger than the past. I think what they've done with the pagers, did you ever hear anything like that? But with the walkie-talkies and pagers and all of the different things, I think they've shown a level of warfare that's been pretty amazing. Whether you're for them or not for them, it's been amazing. Israel would be good. I think Israel has to do one thing. They have to get smart about Trump because they don't back me. I did more for Israel than anybody. I did more for the Jewish people than anybody. And it's not a reciprocal, as I say.
I think your numbers are rising with Jewish Americans. They may not say it out loud, but I think they're rising, Mr. President.
But we should have 100%, and I'll never hit that, but we should have 100%. But it's been an honor talking to you. You're a real professional. You really are.
Thank you, Donald Trump. Keep coming back after you're president again. Good to talk to you.
I will, 100%.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.